Yeah.
Okay, good morning, guys.
Good morning, sir.
Morning, how are you doing?
Good. Very ready for the day, sir.
Good, you ready for the day?
Yes.
Okay, any questions from yesterday?
Not from me.
Anybody else? No questions? So if you don't have any questions, the assumption is you kind of are well versed in everything we covered yesterday. So let's do a quick recap and review just to kind of refresh your memories. And then today I want to go into more the measurement part of it, data collection, analysis, that kind of stuff, presentation, and give you a process of how to actually do your analysis and assessment and evaluation of all of these processes. Okay, so bear in mind that the module is about high reliability organizations. And what I said is you have to understand this concept of reliability before you actually move on. How did we define reliability? How did we define reliability? How did we define reliability?
Accuracy.
Sorry?
Accuracy.
I can't. How do we define? What are the components of reliability?
Accuracy.
Accuracy. Sorry? Functionality and time. Good. Functionality and time. Okay, give me an example of a reliability statement using functionality and time. Well, what would an example be? Give me an example of a reliability statement using functionality and time.
Over the last 10 years of service, 99% of patients were seen within 10 minutes.
Okay, good. So that's a reliability statement. Okay, so, and remember, what I said is what we need to move to in social services is that every service line, every person who delivers a service should collect the data, do the analysis, and actually put up these reliability statements. I think the least you can do from a client point of view and also from an internal point of view is have a sense of just how reliable your services are. Remember, this is not a marketing pitch. Your reliability statement is based on the data. So that's extremely important. And that's kind of one of the missing things in a lot of service industries, and especially in the public sector. I mean, not just in South Africa, but throughout the world. So the whole purpose of this segment of the course is to sensitize you to this concept of reliability and impress upon you how important it is to actually keep your clients or keep the public aware and informed about your services. Okay, so essentially it's kind of what is your performance over a degree of time? How many times do you get it right over a period of time? That's kind of what it is. Okay, somebody used the term accuracy. That's also right. So it's essentially, if you get it right 99 out of 100, that's reliability. Okay, that's reliability. From a management point of view, so the public wants to know this data. Okay, that's your reliability, how reliable you are. From a management point of view, we're more interested in what's called unreliability. Just how unreliable are you? Because these are the kind of changes that we make are going to revolve around unreliability. So if your reliability is 99 out of 100, means you get it right 99 out of 100 times. What's your unreliability?
1 out of 100.
Not quite. Well, right, okay. So it's 1 minus 99 over 100. Okay, and that is equal to 0.01, which is 1 over 100. Okay, your unreliability. How do we, kind of from a management point of view, represent this 0.001? How do we represent that?
10 to the power 2.
10 to the power? Good. 10 to the power? 10 to the power?
2. 10 to the negative power 2.
Okay, 10 to the minus 2. Good. So this is kind of, I want you to get used to this because this is how we actually present this. This is how we talk about it. So remember, 10 to the minus 2 means we get it wrong once in every 100 attempts. 10 to the minus 1, we get it wrong 1 every 10 times. And 10 to the minus 3, 1,000, 4, 5, and 10 to the minus 6. Okay? What is the important one here is 10 to the minus 6 means that what is the significance of 10 to the minus 6?
It's 1 out of 1 million.
One defect in a million. Good. And what's the significance of one defect in a million?
6 standard
High
deviations.
reliability.
Yes. Okay, so it's approximately 6 standard deviations. The actual number for 6 standard deviations is 3.4, but essentially this is what it is. It's approximately 6 standard deviations, okay? But the point is that high reliability organizations operate at this defect rate. So 1 in a million is essentially a defect-free operation. Okay? That's what high reliability is. And remember, I can emphasize and overemphasize is when we talk about defect-free, it really pertains to everything you do in your organizations. Okay, so we will get to it, but defect is not in the traditional sense of the airline industry, a crash, or in healthcare that somebody is dying. You know, it's a defect could be an incomplete form. It could be a client not greeted. It could be a client not followed up on. So that's regarded as a defect. So you can see your scope for actual defects is extremely small for high reliability organizations. Okay? And I said, as we said yesterday, most kind of organizations, the average organization, the average company operates at 10 to the minus 3. So generally they have kind of one defect in every 1,000 initiatives, attempts, whatever you want to use. So that's kind of the average. In healthcare, I said that there are some things that we operate at 10 to the minus 1. There's some things we operate at 10 to the minus 2, some things 10 to the minus 3. But very rarely we start getting into 10 to the 4 and 10 to the minus 5 and 6. I mean, this is kind of the whole big problem in healthcare is that it is riddled with defect, medical error, and safety issues, etc. And this is why quality has become such a big issue in healthcare because of all of these problems we face in terms of safety, in terms of timeliness, efficiency, effectiveness, equitability, patient centricity, staff centricity. This is this whole kind of movement because of the fact that we operate at a very high defect rate in healthcare. And my suspicion is in the social services, it's absolutely no different. Okay, so that's this kind of quest and desire to introduce this concept of of high reliability. So bear that in mind. That's an important concept for you to understand, this whole concept of unreliability, this concept of reliability. And bear in mind, for you to get to this kind of assessment and evaluation, you need the data. This is a data-driven approach. Reliability, you have to understand, you have to be able to collect the data, analyze the data, present the data to actually get a sense of just how reliable you are. Okay, so we introduced this concept of reliability. And as I said to you, it all depends on collecting the data and getting us to operate at 10 to the minus 6. I also introduced this concept of high reliability organizations to you, and I said it has its genesis in the airline industry. And the case that was actually the seed for the transformation of the airline industry was the Tenerife air crash. Okay, you saw the actual case, and you learned a lot of things there. Predominantly, that when things go wrong, it's usually a multitude of things that go wrong at the same time that results in a disaster. Okay, and for you to address that, you need to address stuff at different levels, okay, at root cause to actually correct that. So in summary, what are the 6 characteristics of high reliability organizations? What are the 6 characteristics?
Preoccupation with failure.
Yeah, they have a preoccupation with failure, okay? So, in other words, they assume that everything is going to go wrong. Okay, so one is, so remember, what's the acronym for high reliability organizations? HROs. Okay, it's HROs. Okay, so this stuff you have to remember. I mean, it's this concept, and as I said to you, you're the first group that are actually trying to fuse HRO, the philosophy of HROs with social services. Not done. Not done across the world. You'll never find anything. We're starting to do it in healthcare now, but it's generally a concept we associate with high-risk industries, nuclear power plants, airline industries, etc. Wherever there's a complex set of activities and safety is of paramount importance, that's where these organizations focus a lot on becoming high reliability because of the impact if they don't get it right. Generally, lives lost. But conceptually, it's something that we can use across industries to just ensure that we deliver services reliably. Okay, in other words, that we get it right at least 999,999 times out of 1,000,000. That's what we want to do. Okay, so they have a preoccupation with failure. What does that mean? What does a preoccupation with failure mean?
I think the management also always feels that something is going to go wrong.
Yes.
And as a result, they're always preoccupied with putting measures in place to avoid anything going wrong.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the assumption is, now we generally, it's almost human nature to work off the assumption that we're going to do something right, that things are going to go well. That's the assumption. High reliability organizations operate the other way, that something is going to go wrong, that this thing is going to go wrong. So we need to understand, in the event that it goes wrong, what are we going to do to mitigate that? Okay, what can we put in place to actually mitigate that going wrong? So we know that the security guard is not going to greet the client when the client is 5 meters away. That's what preoccupation with failure is. In the event that does not happen, well, what are we going to do about it? Okay, that's what preoccupation failure. If we know that the social worker is not going to follow up with the client, we don't assume the social worker will follow up. The assumption is always something will not happen, and in the event that it doesn't happen, what are we actually going to do about it? Okay, so that's absolutely critical. So as you can see, to have this philosophy of preoccupation with failure, it means there's a lot of work that you have to do. Because you're assuming basically almost everything in that process is going to go wrong. And remember, we mapped out a generic process yesterday. So this is another thing you have to get used to doing, is map out, the processes for all your service lines. And generally you have several different service lines. We mapped out a generic, where I think you said to me, a client comes in, gets security screened, gets a COVID test, gets initial assessment or screened by the social worker, then gets a social consult, that goes to the supervisor, supervisory note back, and then intervention. That's kind of a generic. So we need to map that. Within each one of these blocks are several different tasks. We need to list all of these tasks, and we have to have a good understanding of what that task entails, how long it takes, what are we going to do if that specific task is not performed. Okay, so there's a lot of work, but we do not have a choice. We have to go through it. Now, what I suggest is, it's the same thing when I speak to healthcare audiences. They say, well, Prof, how are we going to, there's so many different processes, services. Well, you don't have a choice. We should have done this decades ago. We did not do it. We have to do it now. And the way to start is to choose the commonest service lines. So if you go to a primary care clinic, their commonest service line would probably just be a hypertensive and diabetic monthly, checkups. That would be the common. So start with the 10 commonest processes, map them out, and remember, we've got to collect data about every single task within there. So it takes a long time, but you're not going to become an HRO overnight. I mean, that's for sure. But we've got to start somewhere. Okay, so bear that in mind. So preoccupation is failure. We understand this process thoroughly. We understand each task. We assume each task is not going to be executed properly. And there's two things. One is, in the event that it's not executed, what do we actually put in place to mitigate that? And two, So what are we going to put in place to mitigate that? Now, you also have to kind of focus when you're doing this on what task, if not fulfilled properly, has the biggest impact, the biggest adverse impact. So you do what's called a failure mode and effects analysis. I mentioned this to you yesterday, FMEA. It's a failure mode and effects analysis. Okay? Failure mode and effects analysis. So we have mapped this. Every single task we list the tasks in this block, and we say, well, what's the chances that each of these tasks are not done? Okay, and what's the potential impact of that task of not being done? So the one may be greeting. Okay, so the first task is greeting. We can say, well, the chances that the security guard is not going to greet is pretty high, because sometimes they tend just to be more abrasive and rude, etc. So that's the chance is pretty high they're not going to greet. But the impact of them not greeting is not serious. I mean, so the patient, so the client is not going to suffer, and the organization is not going to suffer an adverse event by that not happening. On the other hand, if you get to COVID testing, and if the history is inadequately taken or the patient is inadequately clinically screened, that may happen rarely, but the impact is quite high. Because what might happen potentially is that this patient or this client who's potentially positive will get through the system, and then of course, you know, everybody within the organization and all other clients, they may be infected. So it's what's the possibility that this will go wrong? How frequently can this go wrong? And what is the potential impact? And ideally, what you want to do is develop a mitigation strategy for the ones that are going to happen frequently with adverse impacts. Okay, so instead of developing an FMEA for every single task in this process, you have to sit down as a group, lay out these tasks, and then decide, well, which of these tasks can go wrong frequently with the most adverse impact. Okay? And for that, we develop a mitigation strategy. So that's the way to do it. That's what failure mode and effects analysis is. It's not for every single task in the process. It just becomes too onerous. Okay? But it's something you have to do. That's what preoccupation with failure is the assumption that every single thing is going to fail. In the event that it fails, this is what we need to do. Okay? We need to have this in place because the impact of the security guard not doing the screening, or the COVID screener not doing the screening, or the social worker not following up is pretty serious. Okay, so that's important. And this is now it introduces a whole new approach to doing things. It's going to take a lot of work initially, but once you have these things in place, what you'll find is performance improves, reliability improves, and of course, the perception amongst the public is going to improve dramatically as well. Okay, good. So that's preoccupation with failure. What's the second one?
Reluctance to simplify.
They have a reluctance to simplify. Good. What does that mean?
It means that they go deeper into the cause, the root of the problem, instead of just looking at the face value of the problem.
Absolutely, absolutely. So they do a thorough analysis. You know, it's just, okay, well, the security guard didn't greet the client. You know, okay, we're going to talk to the security guard. He needs to greet the client the next time, and we're done. That's a very simplistic approach. That's not what high reliability organizations do. They want to get to the root of why the security guard is not greeting the clients. You know, is it attributable to the fact that he or she is not trained? Is it a language barrier? And if it's a language barrier, how does somebody get in to do the job with these issues of language, etc., etc.? They get to understand what's the root cause. Root cause analysis is what they do. And they understand very clearly and thoroughly that for something to go wrong, it's generally multiple things that result in it. Okay? And the plane crash is a classic example of how many things have to go wrong at the same time. Okay? And if many things have to go wrong to result in an adverse event or a defect, it also means that there's opportunities to prevent it in many different ways. And I told you yesterday that plane crash would have been averted if any one of several different things had happened. You know, it just coincidentally, everything that went wrong at the same time and resulted in this disaster. So understanding that when things go wrong, whether it's a client not greeted or a form incompleted or the supervisory note not completed or the client is not followed up, is not a simplistic explanation. There's generally several things that you can attribute this to, and you have a responsibility to do that analysis. Okay? Bear that in mind. So they do not accept simplistic explanations. They generally would do root cause analysis. They would thoroughly want to understand why the individual did what they did that resulted in the defect. Okay? Bearing in mind, as I said to you yesterday, that the idea is not to attribute blame to individuals. Okay? We call that in management language, you know, you want to foster a just culture where there is no blaming. Because remember, people don't come to work to underperform or do the wrong thing. It's generally, you know, the system conspires to make them do what they do that may result in a defect. So high reliability organizations understand that. They don't blame individuals. They try and understand, you know, what resulted in them doing what they did. Now the classic example was the Van Zanten, who was the captain for KLM. And he's the guy that actually took off when he should not have taken off. Okay, but they didn't blame him. They attributed that to the fact that he was allowed to captain a flight after coming off 3 months off a simulator. And what they did is then they put a policy in place subsequent to that. It's because, well, it's not his fault. He was actually allowed to come in and take control of a 747 after having not flown for 3 months. Okay? So subsequently a policy is put in place that's used internationally, that a pilot who's been in a simulator for a while cannot come in and captain a flight. He has to be a first officer or whatever it is for 3 flights before he can resume captaincy. So this is what high reliability organizations do. They do not accept simplistic explanations. They try to get to root cause. They do not attribute blame to individuals. They actually try and figure out, well, what in the environment went wrong that allowed this person to err. Okay? Good. What's number 3?
Strong sensitivity to operations.
They have a sensitivity to operations. Good. What does that mean?
It means they need to understand each task and how much time is allocated for that.
Right. Good. So you see this map here? Okay, so this is a process map. But when we start putting in numbers in there, for every task, when we start putting numbers in there, we don't call it a process map anymore. We call it a value stream map. Okay? So they have, every service line is mapped. Okay? And they know exactly, amongst other things, they know they know what is acceptable normal cause variation in that, for that specific task. Now I introduced you to this concept of normal cause variation yesterday. And remember, that comes from a control chart. You can only do this if you have data. Okay? You collect data frequently is the only way you're going to do this. Remember, we drew, okay, we have to collect the data, we have to get a mean, we have to get standard deviation, okay? That's a control chart. Your mean, let's put the mean in black, okay? And then we have 3 standard deviations above and below, okay? And everything in between the 6 standard deviations, 3 above the mean, 3 below the mean, is called normal cause variation. So they understand that 6 sigmas. They understand the normal cause variation. And they understand which is special cause, which is anything above the upper control limit, anything below the lower cause is abnormal. They also understand patterns here suggesting that this process is becoming unstable. So even though numbers may be between the upper and lower control limit, if it's constantly going up, if it's constantly going down, that's an alert that this process is going out of sync. Now you can only get to that level by collecting data regularly. Okay, it's extremely important. This is not something, high reliability organizations don't collect data once a year. They don't run a client satisfaction survey once a year. They do it in real time. It's the only way you can respond to something. You can't do it with annual data collection or annual assessments and evaluations. Okay? So they have a very, very strong sensitivity to operations. And what they're doing is they're monitoring, they're collecting data in real time, and they're trying to pick up any sense that the process is becoming unstable. They're looking for a hint that stuff is going to go wrong. Okay? You can only do that with regular data collection. The ideal situation is real-time data collection. Okay? That you're getting data regularly. And now, given what we have access to from a technological point of view, there is no excuse not to collect data in real time. You know, in healthcare, and I kicked up a big fuss, they do patient satisfaction surveys, which you know after the last module now is irrelevant. Satisfaction doesn't say anything about the way something is being done. Okay, we move to experience. But if you're measuring that once a year, that's not really helpful. Okay? You now have the means to measure patient experience, and in your case, client experience, in real time. You have the means to do that. Okay? And we should be doing that. Because that is what sensitivity to operations is. It's this ability to collect data in real time. You know, file extraction. How long does it take? Waiting times. The data we need to collect. And what high reliability organizations do is they have people in the organization that's their job, because it's to collect data regularly, analysis and in real time, so you can make adjustments in real time, not annually. Okay? So you can imagine if the airlines only collect data once a year regarding safety or maintenance or whatever it is. I mean, you know, you and I would be extremely afraid to fly. Okay, so that's what sensitivity to operations is all about. Okay, so what's the fourth thing?
Commitment to resilience.
Sorry?
Commitment to resilience.
I didn't get that.
Commitment to resilience.
Sorry?
Commitment to resilience.
They are extremely resilient.
They are okay, sorry. They are resilient. Good. They are resilient, you're right. Okay, now the reason they are resilient. Sorry, there's a dog barking around here. Okay, so they're extremely resilient. That's an outcome of all of these things that we just spoke about. Now, resilience, what resilience means is that the organization can come back. you know, they have factored in the assumption that something is going to go wrong. They have put in place mitigation strategies, and that's exactly what they do. When things do go wrong, they're able to bounce back. Okay, that's resilience. It is, they always come back. They go and do their full assessments and evaluations of what went wrong, etc. But they always come back. And the reason they come back, they anticipated the failure. They have the strong sensitivity to operations. They do not oversimplify. They understand everything, so they're able to resume operations pretty quickly. Okay, good. What's 5?
Defer to expertise.
They defer to expertise. Now this is very important. For us in the public sector, the experts are the ones who sit at the top. That's not how high reliability organizations operate. High reliability organizations, the person who is the expert is the person who's doing the work. Okay? So you're not going to resolve an issue of long waiting times in the boardroom. You're going to have to resolve it at the interface of the client and the reception area, at the interface of the client and the social work area. That's where problems are solved. Problems are solved where it happens by the people who have the responsibility to do the task. Okay? It is the CEO or the unit manager or the office manager is not the one that has all the answers to all of these things. That's a classic HRO characteristic, is they always go to the coalface, to the people who are actually involved with the task, and they get them involved in understanding what went wrong, what can we do to mitigate this, and what can we do to help you. So that's extremely important, okay? And what's number 6?
Communal mindset.
Good. They have this kind of communal mindset. What is a communal mindset?
It means if one office made an error, they contact the other office, render
Yes.
the same service.
Yes. They democratize information. The information flows within the office and across different offices. Okay, so if an error is made in Office A by Officer A, everybody needs to learn from that. Okay, everybody within the office has to learn from that. And then everybody in other offices that are performing the same task have to learn from that. Okay, there's no need for all officers to make a mistake. If one has made the mistake, one has learned and one has rectified it. So it is, how do you democratize knowledge and information across the whole system? Okay? Almost the equivalent of putting in place a knowledge exchange or an innovation exchange. So if things go wrong, we did the analysis, we share that information across the whole department. Okay, what went wrong? What's your analysis? What did you put in place to rectify that, so that everybody learns and everybody can do that? Okay, and I told you, it's a you know, the airline industry operates like that. If a plane crashes in one airline, the similar aircraft across the world is grounded. You saw that recently with the 737 MAX. That's exactly what happened. With one crash, you know, all airlines grounded those planes. Boeing stopped manufacturing until they actually corrected the error, and then, you know, they start again. That's what a communal mindset is. We all learn from one incident. Okay? And that's very rare in the public sector. Now, you can only learn and do that if you're a transparent profession. If you're transparent and you do not attribute blame to others. Now, this is a big problem in some professions, is you know, we're so afraid of being blamed or attributing blame that there's a total lack of transparency. You know, we don't want to report something because I'm going to be accused of you know, incompetence or whatever that is. Okay, that's a major issue. HROs do not operate like that. Okay, because the reason they're able to have transparency and openness is because of that just culture that I spoke about. Is you never end up blaming an individual. You regard a problem as a blessing, as an opportunity to improve a process. Okay? And if that's the culture that you drive, you know, people will be happy to report incidents. But if you have a blame culture, where you try and attribute an error to an individual, then you're not going to kind of get the transparency that you need to become a high reliability organization. Okay, it's absolutely critical. So this is important. These are the characteristics of high reliability organizations. Bear in mind, behind every one of these 6 things is a whole lot of other information that you have to familiarize yourself with. Now, I've given you 3 or 4 readings. All of those readings, I know they're heavily focused in healthcare, but hopefully working with you, we'd be able to replicate a lot of this in social services. But each one of this, you can see, is kind of, there's a lot of theoretical underpinning and a lot of applied underpinning behind each one of them. Okay? Do you have any questions? Does anybody have any questions about these characteristics of high reliability organizations?
Can somebody mute the mic? Hello.
Hello?
From what you have presented yesterday and today, I should indicate that I have learned a lot. But then, Prof, I want you to take us through this buzzword that is coming from the government, issue of consequence management. Where does it still tie in our HROs?
Consequence management.
Yes.
Okay, so what context do you use consequent management? Consequent management could be a consequent could be the equivalent of a defect or something that's done incorrectly or an error. Now, how you manage that, do you have a process to actually manage that? Now, HROs, remember, are designed to prevent consequences. You anticipate them, you prevent them, and you put in place mitigation strategies. That's what HROs are. But we will also come back to, if you have an adverse event, what you have to do is how do you analyze what went wrong and how do you actually prevent that from happening? So I think it may just be, my assumption is consequence is equivalent to defect or error or something going wrong. That's kind of my interpretation. You know? But does anybody else have anything to add to that? It's a good question, because we don't want you leaving with conflicting messages. Does anybody have anything else to add to that?
Yes. From what I've seen on the consequence management document, you are indeed correct to relate it to the defects that are happening in the system.
Yeah.
But I think more specifically, it is aimed at finding somebody to blame in
Yeah.
the process.
Yeah. No. That's not HROs. HROs are the direct opposite. HROs is what in the system went wrong to result in the consequence. That's what HROs are. The HROs are the strongest characteristic is a just culture. That we never do anything to attribute blame. Everything we do is aimed at improving the process. Remember, HROs is about operational excellence. If somebody errs, it's because something happened that enabled them to err. That's what HROs do. It is, we do not attribute blame to individuals whatsoever. You know? So that's extremely important. And it's the most powerful leadership tool that you have is creating this culture in your organization where people feel free to report that they did something wrong. It's almost something that you cannot grasp, but that's exactly how HROs operate. If you read about pilots, that's exactly what pilots do. If they have a near miss, the first thing they do is get off the plane and report it. Because they know that others can learn from that near miss, because a near miss to you may result in a fatal crash to somebody else. And if we do not report that and we do not address why I had the near miss, then of course it could result in a disaster. Now, I gave you some examples. You know, in medicine, it's pretty common that very often, you may find that at the last minute, the nurse realizes that it's the incorrect injection. But what do? They just kind of, okay, sorry, the patient should not have received this injection or not this dosage. They make the adjustment and they continue. Well, what happens if another patient actually receives the wrong injection or the wrong dosage and actually dies? And the reason that would have happened is because this nurse did not report that near miss. Because reporting that near miss does not end up blaming the nurse. It is aimed at understanding how is it possible that an incorrect vial or the incorrect dosage landed up in the nurse's hand just prior to the injection. That's what we want to understand. Is it an issue of packaging? Is it an issue of labeling? Is it an issue of, the doses are packed next to each other in the pharmacy, so it's easy for you to make the mistake? That's what we want to know. That's what high reliability organizations do. Okay? Nowhere are we blaming anybody. We're trying to understand why somebody was placed in a position to have an adverse consequence. That's what we want to do. Okay? And frankly, the more of these reported, the better. It doesn't reflect poorly on your organization, it reflects well in your organization. So you as a leader or a manager, one thing you can do is incentivize people to report near misses, report defects, report mistakes they make. Incentivize them to do it. Okay? That's what you have to do. Now, this is almost kind of counterintuitive, that you're incentivizing people to report mistakes they make. But that's what it takes to get to high reliability. Because that's how you're going to know what's going wrong and what you have to address. That's how you're going to know. Okay? So it's extremely important. I mean, it's, and as I said, it requires you to do things differently. Okay, some really good questions. Any other questions? Any other comments? Anything else that we covered yesterday that you want me to go over again with you?
Yes, sir.
Sorry?
If you can just take us through, I'm sorry I joined late. If you can take us through the FMEA.
Okay.
Failure modes and effective analysis.
Okay.
You didn't get it then, but.
Okay. Okay. Okay, it's called FMEA, Failure Mode and Effects Analysis. FMEA starts with clearly mapping your process. Okay? You have to, and as I said, a lot of you in social services, there are several different processes. Some of them are generic. You know, the patient comes in, is screened by A, B, C, D, and then suddenly things start branching out, depending on the interventions, etc. But you have no choice but to actually map those processes out. Map those processes out. Remember, each one of this is a step. Within each step is a task. Okay? We have to map the tasks within each step. Because high reliability organizations understand what happens within each step very thoroughly. High reliability organizations are also characterized by anticipation of failure or preoccupation with failure. Their assumption is that something is going to go wrong. Normal organizations operate off an assumption that things are going to go well, that nothing is going to go wrong. Okay? So failure mode and effects analysis actually means, well, you list all of these tasks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay? You list these tasks, and then you say, well, okay, how frequent can these things go wrong? You know, so it'll be from frequent to infrequent. Okay, and then what's the potential impact? What is the impact? The impact could be severe or insignificant. Okay? So we have the tasks. These are the tasks. We have the frequency with which this task can go wrong. And then we have the severity. So let's assume task 1 is greeting upon arrival. Okay? Now, as I said, the security guy, you know, you may say, well, okay, everybody greets the clients when they come in. So it's infrequent. So we have it as infrequent. And then what's the impact if the security guard does not greet? Okay, it's an issue. We need to address it. But the client is not going to suffer adversely, and the organization is not going to suffer adversely. Okay, so it's infrequent. And what we do is we say that for that task, you know, the probability that it going wrong is low, the impact is low, so our interventions are not prioritized. Okay? And the whole idea of prioritizing is because there's too many tasks happening in one service line. We have to prioritize the ones where the errors can go frequently and the impact is adverse. Okay? So, and even if it's infrequent, by the way. So you might get COVID screening. Now, how frequent can somebody, you know, what's the frequency with which somebody may not have in our case, we may do a point of care test. So let's assume you have a point of care test as for COVID. I know you don't have that here. You do temperature scans or whatever. in the US, we do point of care testing. So, okay, the patient, how frequently can somebody miss a point of care test? We can say it's infrequent, but if they do miss it, the impact is very high. Okay, so it's high, it means we need an intervention for this. What do we put in place to ensure the person actually has this test? So we will put in maybe something at the beginning of this step. Okay, the first thing this person does is verify POC. Can you see? That's what failure modes and effect analysis is. We assume something is going to go wrong. We prioritize the tasks that can go wrong frequently or infrequently but have the worst impact. And then we put something in place to mitigate that. So we know that if a point of care test is not, COVID test is not done, the impact could be serious because the person can, as I said, enter the office being positive and contaminate everybody. So what we do is we put in place at the beginning of sorry, is that a question? We put in place a mitigation strategy which may be review point of care test before we start this process. Okay? Does that clarify it? Does that make it clear?
Yes, it does.
So it's extremely important. Failure modes and effects analysis is critical to high reliability organizations. You have to anticipate and work off the assumption that all of these tasks are going to go wrong, and in the event they go wrong, how can we rectify it? Okay, so this whole concept of building in redundancy, check, 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 is essentially because of this. Okay, so to prevent medication errors, in the case that I just gave you in healthcare, where we, especially with injectables, you don't want the patient to get the wrong injection, that we build in redundancy. Okay, from the time the doctor writes the prescription, that it's actually check, check, check again. Right patient, right dosage, right medication. It goes to the pharmacist. The receiving pharmacist will check it 3 times. Bang, bang, bang. The dispensing pharmacist will check it. When the nurse picks it up from the pharmacy, he or she checks it. When it's received in the ward, they check it. And prior to administration, they check it. That's redundancy. Why? Because we know if we get that wrong, we know it can go wrong, and we know if it does go wrong, the effect can be fatal. Okay, so we build in that redundancy. Same thing here. COVID screening not done. Impact adverse. So what do? We build in that. As soon as they get to the next step, the first thing we do is make sure that the COVID screening was completed, that the patient is a low risk, etc., and then we continue. Okay? And it's the same thing for everything. Same thing. I mean, it's... So client identification would be important, extremely important. So how do we actually build in that redundancy to ensure that John Brown is John Brown? And especially if there are 100 different John Browns, how do we know that the John Brown, that folder we have, is the John Brown that's actually here? So these are kinds of things that we have to do. Okay, good question. Any other question? So this is the way, by the way, that you will actually learn. If you have an issue, ask the question. And we'll clarify it for you.
Hello, Prof.
Hi.
Can we please go through the calculations of the standard deviation and mean? Okay, good. So, do you have the link that Vic posted on the chat yesterday? Yes, I do. Okay. So for everybody that's on here today, let's just take a data set. Let's take the waiting time that the client has come into the reception. Waiting time from the time the client walks into the office
till the time the receptionist pulls out the file. Okay, so what we're doing is every day we're collecting, and we'll talk about this under measurement, but now that you asked the question, we'll address it. Okay, so remember the thing about data collection is it's got to be often. You can't do this annually. Okay, your data collection intervals have to be frequently. The best case scenario is to collect daily data. But it might be impossible for you, but high reliability organizations collect data almost daily. Okay, so if you have to allocate individuals to collect data at certain parts of the process daily, you need to do it. So what we have to do is, let's assume we collect the waiting times, we collect, so we have to determine what's the waiting time, where does it start and where does it end. Okay, so from the time the patient steps in till the time the patient has a folder in the hand, that's where we will measure it, and we can just take 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 10, 12, 8, 7, 6, 9, 4, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Okay, so write these down. 10, 15, 10, 10, 9, 12, 8, 7, 6, 4. Write it down. And then, Vic, can you pull that up and share the screen as well, please? So now you can use any web. There's a lot of, you Google calculate standard deviation, there's a lot of websites that will help you do this. And all it'll ask you to do is input the data points. You're going to input these. So I'm just going to get Vic to pull it up and then share the screen. So this is very important. Calculating, because data is going to become something that you're going to be doing regularly. Okay, so this is the website that, can you see the screen? Vic has shared the screen. Can you see the screen? Okay, so now we're going to input the scores. Vic, you can put 10, 15, 10, 10, 9, 12, 8, 7, 6, 4. Okay, that's all you do. So these are 10 clients that came in. We collected their 10 waiting times. We put it in there, and you scroll down. This is a sample. Now I'm going to come back to this, but maybe let's clarify this while we're here. Okay, so you can see there's a population and sample. Can you see that? Choice.
Yes.
And yesterday, I think somebody asked the question, which do we choose? Okay, so when you choose everybody, so let's assume you're running in this case, you're running a very small office that you only see 10 clients a day. If so you measured all 10, you actually then have chosen the population, because that's everybody. However, if you see 2,000 or let's say, that's ridiculous. If you see 200 clients a day, you cannot measure, well, you can if you want to, but you cannot measure the waiting time for 200 people. You've got to choose a random sample of the 200. Okay, and if you chose a random sample, then you will click on sample. Okay, that's how you take the difference. Now I'm going to come back to that because I think it's important. Let me give you a small hint now while we're at it. And how do you choose sample size? So if you have less than 30, you choose all. Meaning that if you run a small office and you only see 30 clients or less a day, you have to sample all. You get that?
Yes, Prof.
Good. If you see between 30 and 100, you have to sample, you take a random sample of 30. So I'm not expecting you, if you see 100, I'm not expecting you to measure the wait time for 100 people. If you see between 30 and 100, you choose a random sample of 30. If you see between 100 and 500 people, you choose a random sample of 50. If you see more than 500, you choose a random sample of 70. So you can see the data collection is not that onerous, because we're not measuring every single person that comes in. So if you're extracting 500 files a day, or more than 500 files a day, and you want to review the files to see how many files were completed, you only have to take a random sample of 70. Okay? If you are seeing between 30 and if you're seeing 85 a day, you only take a random sample of 30. If you see 200 a day, you only take a random sample of 50. Okay? So this is called a sample size. This is the population. If you take all 500, you'll click on population. In this case, we only had 10 clients. 10 clients would be what? What would 10 clients be here? What do we select? So 10 clients is less than 30, we take all. Okay? So what is Vic going to hit on that website of his, sample or population?
Population.
Excellent, excellent. So Vic, go hit population. You got to reset. Okay. So this is important. You should write this down somewhere because it's a rough. Now this is for management. Okay. This data, this sample size calculation is what I use to manage. If you're doing a doctorate or a master's degree and you want to calculate sample size, there's a specific calculation formula you're going to use. But it's going to be approximately this. Yes.
Rob?
Yes, I can.
What is that you cannot see?
Sorry?
The bot is not clear, you cannot see.
Okay, I'll get Vic to adjust that. Okay, so go Vic, what are you getting here now? So you're getting so we've got 10, that's the number. You got a mean of 9.1 and the standard deviation, what do you have? Standard 2.95. Okay. Okay, did you guys get this from what Vic did?
Yes.
So he put in the 10 numbers. He chose population because we only saw 10 clients for the day. So we took all. We have to take all because we know when you're less than 30, you take all. Okay? And we calculated, there's no manual. You can calculate all of this manually if you want to. You can add it all up, divide it by 10, it'll give you the same mean. Now standard deviation is also a formula, but you really, in this day and age, don't have to do it manually. Do it the way we do it. So we've got a mean of 9.1 and we've got a standard deviation of 2.95. We'll come back to that. Okay, so Vic, you can exit that, just point up, just focus on this. Now I want you to write this down because this is important. Okay, you're going to title this sample size. Sample size. Can you see this? Less than 30, you take all. 30 to 100, you take 30. 30 to 99. So 101 to 500, you take 50. More than 500, you take 70. So, from a management point of view, the maximum sample size that you will ever need is 70. Okay? So what I'm saying indirectly is you don't have any excuses not to collect the data because it's not a lot. So we have to get used to collecting data regularly and running the analysis. You can see that it literally took us 2 minutes if we only see 10 clients to run these calculations. Okay? Now remember what we did with this is we took this and we created a control chart. Now you can actually do this using Excel as well, if you know how to use the software, but you can actually do it manually. Okay, so if you go from, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay, so we plot that. We got a mean of 9.1. That's your mean. We got a standard deviation of 2.95. So we come down 2.95, another 2.95, another 2.95. That's your lower control limit. LCL, lower control limit. 3 standard deviations below. Okay, this is 3 standard deviations above. That's called your upper control limit. Okay, so we just created this, and now what we do is we take these individual numbers and we put it in. That's 10, 15 up there, 10 again, 9, 12, 8, 7, 6, and 4. Okay, and then we can join all of these like that. Okay, that's what you do. Okay, so this is 10 patients. We measured their waiting times. We took all 10 because our population was less than 30, so we took all. We calculated using the software program that's there. We got a mean of 9.1, 2.5. We created this control chart. Mean 9.1, and then 1 standard deviation, which is 2.95 below, 2 standard deviations, 3, and same up. When you get to 3 standard deviations below, it's called the lower control limit, and above it's called the upper control limit. So in the control chart, you got a mean, you got the upper control limit, which is plus 3 standard deviations. You got the lower control limit, which is minus 3 standard deviations. Essentially, a process is stable if all of these numbers are between those upper control limit and lower control limit. Okay? That's what it means. It means your process is stable. It doesn't mean that it's the best. It just means that it's stable. That's all it means. It is, now reliability is accuracy. It is consistency, as you all said yesterday. It doesn't mean it's where you want to be. Because you can be reliably high. You understand what I'm trying to say? You can have a waiting time that's reliably at 20 minutes. In fact, that would be, if every single one of this read 20, you would have a mean of 20 and a standard deviation of 0, which means everything is one straight line. So it's within the control. It's very, very tight, which is very reliable. But when you benchmark against another organization that's doing it at 10, you know that you still have a gap between your performance, where you are and where you need to be. Okay, so bear that in mind. We're going to come to that now, but just reliability does not mean validity. Because if you're shooting for 10, you can be reliable at 20. Means you're consistent at 20. It doesn't mean 20 is where you want to be or should be. So just bear that in mind, okay? Any questions about this? Really important questions. And I'm glad that you asked them so we can clarify them. This has to become second nature to you. The language, the way you calculate, the way you collect data, the way you present it, and the way you talk about it. Okay? Now, when you have your meetings, your Monday morning meetings or your Friday meetings, this is what you should be presenting and talking about. Okay? Any other questions?
Yes, Prof.
Yeah.
Now I see, but what I don't get is this job that we are putting on. I know it is the time that the client has waited, but I don't understand. Remember, if there's a y-axis and an x-axis,
Right.
then we will to say. I don't get how we jot out the dots.
The dots is just individual clients. This is each time, each client, client 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Or it could be an average wait time, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. So 10 minutes may be the average wait time on Monday. 15 minutes may be the average wait time on Tuesday. Or it could be the average wait time in the morning, average wait time. Then you will put here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Or you can put client 1, client 2, client 3, client 4. See? Or this may be the average wait time for January, February, March, April.
Thank you very much. Now I get it.
You get that?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? What's the time? How are we doing for time? 10:17, man. We've gone on for more than an hour. Any other questions? Let's clear this up. Any issues? I like the questions because it means that I want you to feel free to ask the question. Nobody is going to be judging you on the question you ask, but you need to leave with clarity in terms of what we're trying to get you to do.
Hi, Prof.
Hi.
I understand that we used time in this example, but I want to find out what other
measures?
Yes.
We are coming to that. As soon as we come back from break, we're going to come to that.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Prof.
Any other questions? Okay, if you have no questions, let's take a break. What's the time, Vic? 10:18. Let's say 10:20. We'll come back 15 minutes. We'll come back at 25 to 11. Okay? If you have any questions in these next 15 minutes, jot them down as soon as we come back and before we start going into measurements and stuff like that and what do you measure, I can address that. But it's extremely important that we clear stuff up with you in real time. Okay? Take a break, 15 minutes. We'll catch you when we come back.